Hello everyone, I am Suraj Bharat Gorle from ENH iSecure Private Limited. Today we are discussing about the SailPoint IdentityNow REST APIs. In this presentation, we are going to see about Introduction to API, IdentityNow REST API architecture, REST API authentication, REST API authorization, API interaction, and IdentityNow REST APIs. Let us understand what API is. API stands for Application Programming Interface. API are mechanisms that enables two software components to communicate with each other using a set of definitions and protocols. In the context of APIs, the word application refers to any software with a distinct function. These contracts define how two applications communicate with each other using request and response. API architecture is usually explained in terms of client and servers. The application sending a request is called as a client and the application sending a response is called server. For example, one application acts as a client and the other acts as a server. A client asks for some resources, say for example a photo, and the server sends that photo to the client. The client here can be mobile, desktop, laptop, or any device you use to surf the internet. In this slide, we are discussing about what are the benefits of APIs. The major benefit of using an API is accessing and consuming data and the services from thousands of independent sources. This means organizations of all sizes can access these functionalities without developing their own specialized applications. The first benefit is integration. APIs are used to integrate new applications with existing software systems. This increases development speed because each functionality doesn't have to be written from scratch. You can use APIs to leverage existing codes. The second benefit is innovation. Entire industries can change with the arrival of a new application. Businesses need to be respond quickly and support the rapid development of innovative services. They can do this by making changes at the API level without having to rewrite the whole code. The third benefit is expansion. APIs present a unique opportunity for businesses to meet their clients' need across their different platforms. For example, Map API allow map information integrated via website, Android, iOS, etc. The fourth benefit is ease of maintenance. The API acts as a gateway between two systems. Each system is obliged to make internal changes so that the API is not impacted. This way, any future code changes by one party do not impact by other party. In this slide, we talk about types of APIs. There are different types of API that serves different purposes and are designed for different use cases. Web services that support system interaction through URL paths. A web service API or web API is an application processing interface between a web server and a web browser. All web services are API, but not all APIs are web services. Web Services API are typically private and only approved partner may access them. The API is divided into two types. First is REST API. It is a special type of web service API that uses a standard architectural style, and second is SOAP API. Is developed in a more structured, and this is a less flexible API that was more popular in the past. In this slide, we discuss about what is HTTP methods and types of HTTP methods. The HTTP means Hypertext Transfer Protocol is designed to enable communications between client and servers. HTTP works as a request response protocol between client and the server. For example, a client sends an HTTP request to the server and then the server returns a response to the client. The response contains status of information about the request and may also contain the requested content with the specific API format. Here is a high-level overview of several types of HTTP APIs method. The two most common HTTP methods are GET and POST. First, we'll discuss about GET method. Get method used to retrieve information or data from specific resources. Second one is post method. Post method submits data to the process to a specific resources. Third, put method. Put method updates a specified resources with a new data. Delete method. Delete method deletes a specific resources. Patch method. Patch method partially update a specified resources. Options method. Options method retrieves the supported HTTP methods of a server endpoint. Head method. Head method retrieves only the headers of a response without the response body. Connect method. Connect method establishes a network connection to resources typically used for SSL or TLS tunneling. Last, trace method. Trace method echoes the received request back to the client for debugging purposes. API methods are typically used to interact with web services or web applications, allowing developers to access and manipulate data or functionality from a remote source. In this slide, we are going to have a close view on REST APIs. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. This is the most popular and flexible APIs found on web today. The client sends request to the server as data. The server uses this client input to start internal functions and return output data back to the client. REST defines a set of functionalities like get, post, put, delete, etc. that clients can use to access servers data. Client and servers exchange data using HTTP. The main feature of REST API is statelessness. Statelessness means that servers do not save client's data between requests. Client requests to the server are similar to URLs you type in your browser to visit a website. The response from the server is a plain data without the typical graphical rendering of a web page. In today's landscape, the majority of APIs are powered by REST. Web applications are commonly employ REST API. These are versatile interface for sending, retrieving data through the HTTP request in JSON, XML, and plain text, among the other formats. Adhering to the REST principle helps developer to create dependable, user-friendly API systems that are capable of being used across devices and platforms. In this slide, we are going to have close view on SOAP APIs. SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, is a secure way to build APIs, and it works by encoding data in XML. Its secure nature is another important benefit that has made SOAP widely used for transferring highly sensitive information. SOAP APIs is commonly rely on XML messages to enable communications between two applications over a network. SOAP APIs only supported XML format, so for that this is a less flexible API as compared REST APIs. Simple Object Access Protocol is a message specification for exchanging information between system and the applications. When it comes to the application programming interface, a SOAP is developed in a more structured and formalized way. SOAP has a strict rule and rigid messaging standards that can make it more secure than protocol as such as REST. These types of APIs are frequently used in enterprise applications, particularly for payment processing and customer management, as they are highly secured in nature. For example, think of SOAP as being like a national postal service. It provides a reliable and trusted way to send and receive messages between systems. It is older, established and dependable, but it can be slower than competing architectural style like REST. In this slide, we will discuss about URL endpoints and collection hierarchies. Endpoints is a very specific resources that we are trying to get information about or take action on. The above example, the host name consists of an endpoint URL. The host name is made up of a company name or services that we are trying to connect. Base path usually like a version number. The base path is like v1, v2, v3 or beta APIs, and this is very static part of an endpoint that can't be changed. Collection describes about a collection of resources and its descriptive name for every resources exists within it. Resource, it describes a very specific data that we have trying to access. By using resource ID, we can access exact resource data. Now usually the endpoint is made up of collection hierarchies, so you can think about as a kind of like a folder on your computer or mobile or any application like Google Photos or music library or other applications. Something with the RESTful API, they follow collection hierarchy. So as you move down, the path is get more specific until you finally reach the specific piece of data you are trying to access. In this slide, we will discuss about benefits of REST APIs in SailPoint IdentityNow. By using REST APIs to interact with the SailPoint IdentityNow platform to achieve repeatable automated processes with greater scalability and extend IdentityNow's functionality and the usability. There are several benefits mentioned below. Transform creation, creating rule, creating and provisioning policy, customization of account profiles, system level changes, getting all information about sources and the account, object management and many more. In this slide, we will discuss about IdentityNow REST API architecture. Before that, we will have a look on what is microservice. Microservice is a software architecture employing a suite of independently deployable modular services. Each service performs a distinct job and communicates through a well-defined lightweight mechanism to serve a business goal and focused on a single job. When we will make a API call to the SailPoint identity now, then it will go via API gateway, where authorization will check via auth 2.0. Basically, authorization is the act of validating the user's permission to access given a resources. Auth 2.0 is an industry standard protocol for authorization. Once authorization is done, you can access the resources. Below are the REST API supportability. V3 supported and preferable, V1 private to the cell point, V2 deprecated, beta. This is an early deployment cycle and is subject to change. In this slide, we will discuss about REST API interaction flow in IdentityNow. With the help of IdentityNow REST APIs, if you want to interact with a computer or a system to retrieve information or perform a function with SailPoint IdentityNow's API, you can extend your IdentityNow platform far beyond its current capabilities. You can think of an API as a mediator between users or client and the resources or web services they want to get. It's also a way for an organization to share resources and the information while maintaining security, control, and the authentication determine who get access to what. With SailPoint IdentityNow APIs, you can do some extra operations like create, update, delete, etc. To be able to do so, we have first authenticate to the IdentityNow APIs. If the authentication wrong, so its response like token fails authentication. If it is right, so after that the APIs respond with the JWT access token that you can provide to authorize your API request and do some work like fetching data or update, delete the data at particular resources or client system. Here access token request means the HTTP client make a client request to IdentityNow to get a JWT access token. If the request is valid, IdentityNow respond with the successful JSON access token, or if it is fail, response like token fails authentication. The HTTP client make a request to an IdentityNow endpoint and the both of the request is valid. After that, IdentityNow respond to that client. In this slide, we will discuss about REST API operations in IdentityNow. With the help of REST APIs, we can do read, create, update, and delete operations. We will discuss each operation one by one. First, post operation. Post API requests allow appending data to the endpoint. This is a method used to add information within the request body in the server. It is commonly used for passing dedicated information. Get operations. Get API request is used to obtain details from the endpoint and does not have any impact on endpoints. The GET request does not update any endpoint data while it's triggered. Update operations. Put API request is used to pass data to the server for creation or a modification of an endpoint. The difference between post and the put is that post is not the idempotent. Delete operations. Delete API's request deletes the resources already present in the server. The delete method sends a request to the server for deleting the request mentioned in the endpoint. In this slide, we will discuss about REST API authentication in IdentityNow. Authentication is the act of validating a user's identity, generally by passing some kind of credentials. Authentication provides access control for systems by checking to see if a user's credential matches the credentials in a database of an authorized user or in a data authentication server. By doing this, authentication assures secure systems, secure processes, and enterprise information security. In IdentityNow, SailPoint use client ID and client secret as a credential. In this slide, we are going to discuss about how does REST API authentication flow go on in SailPoint IdentityNow. When you make an API call, it follows the flow as per the diagram. The HTTP client makes a request to SailPoint IdentityNow to get a JWT access token. If the request is valid, IdentityNow responds to that HTTP client request with the JWT access token. If the request is not valid, so error responses is written with an HTTP 400 status code with the error and the error description parameter. Then the HTTP client make a request to an IdentityNow endpoint with the header and the authorization. If both the request itself and the JWT access token in the headers are valid, then IdentityNow responds to that client. In this slide, we will discuss about Auth 2.0 token. Auth 2.0 is the industry standard protocol for authorization. Auth 2.0 it is designed primarily as a means of granting access to a set of resources. In a simple way, Auth 2.0 access token is a string that the Auth client uses to make a request to the resource servers. Access token is a piece of data that represents the authorization to access resources on behalf of end user. It represents caller's authority. Access token issued after authentication and the authorization. These are the short-lived tokens. Provide user-level access used to securely transfer information over the web. In this slide, we will discuss about JSON Web Tokens. JSON Web Tokens or JWT authentication is a stateless method of securely transmitting information between two parties as a JSON object. It is often used to authenticate and authorize users in web application and APIs. In the domain of authentication, stateless refers to a mechanism in which the server does not maintain any session state between requests. Each request in a stateless authentication system is a complete and contains all the data required to authenticate and authorize the user or entity. In the case of JWT authentication, this comes in the form of token. A JSON token consists of some parties like a header containing information about the types of token and algorithm used to generate the signature. A payload containing the claims made by the user that can include client ID and client secret for maintaining information about the operation of a token. JSON Web Token supports client credential grant flows. JSON Web Tokens generate with the help of REST APIs. With the help of REST APIs generated JWT access token, it expires is in 12 hours, means 43199 seconds. In this slide, we are discussing about what is authorization in SailPoint IdentityNow. Authorization in a system security is the process of giving the user permission to access a specific resource, or authorization is the act of validating the user's permission to access a given resource. This term is often used interchangeably with access control or client privileges. Giving someone permission to download a particular file on a server or providing individual users with administrative access to an application are good examples of authorization. In this slide, we are discussing about how does REST API authorization flow go on SailPoint IdentityNow. The diagram shows the flow of authorization in IdentityNow. In the first step, client server send a access token request to the server with the help of REST APIs, and it will contain credentials. If provided credential and the request is valid, then IdentityNow respond to that HTTP client with the JWT access token. If the request is not valid, then error response is returned with an HTTP 400 status code. In brief, if the request for an access token is valid, the authorization server needs to generate an access token and return this to the client, typically along with some additional properties about the authorization, means what user have permission and all. If user don't have a permission to do some particular operation and make a request for that time server responses with the 403 status code represents or server considers them insufficient to grant access. The HTTP client makes a request for creating a source in a particular resources to an IdentityNow endpoint with the header. Here authorization is a bearer token. If the request itself and the JWT access token in its headers are valid, then IdentityNow respond to that client with JSON code syntax and they return a 200 response code. In this slide, we are discussing about types of authorization grant flows in IdentityNow. There are three types of authorization grant flows in SailPoint IdentityNow. First one is client credential, second one is authorization code, and third one is refresh token. We'll see about client credentials. By using scripts, programs, or system-to-system integrations, clients can be receive a JWT access token without users' involvement. Second one is authorization code. The authorization code is converted into an access token by clients using this grant type because there is a login into the IdentityNow with a subsequent redirect back-to-back web applications or client. Authorization codes are mainly used by web applications. Third one is refresh tokens. When an existing access token expires, clients are used this grant type to replace a refresh token for a new access token. This allows clients to continue using APIs without having to re-authenticate as frequently. This grant type is commonly used together with authorization code to prevent a user from having login into several times per day. In this slide, we are discussing about how to generate automated acquisition of tokens in IdentityNow with the help of client credentials. Client credentials acquisition of tokens clients use this grant type to obtain a JWT access token without users' involvement in such as scripts, programs, or system-to-system integration. This is the simplest authentication in SailPoint IdentityNow. For generating JWT access token and authorization client credentials mean client ID and client secrets are both important. In this condition, client send request to IdentityNow to get JWT access token, and if request is valid, IdentityNow respond to that HTTP client with the JWT access token, and if the token is valid, then server checks whether the user is authorized to perform the desired operation on the resource or not. Client ID and client secret or personal access token generate with the help of IdentityNow UI and REST API. These are two methods. These two methods are discussed in next slides. In this slide, we are discussing about how to generate access token with the help of IdentityNow UI and REST APIs. First, generate personal access token with the help of SailPoint IdentityNow user interface. A personal access token is a method of authenticating an API as a user without providing a username and password. In IdentityNow, users can do the following to create and manage their personal access token. First, log in to the SailPoint IdentityNow tenant as an admin. In right side corner, select the drop-down menu. Under their name, select Preferences. After selecting Personal Access Token and then provide a description about the token's purpose. Select Create Tokens at the bottom of the page and generate the client ID and client secret and save this credential for users. Second, generate personal access token with the help of SailPoint IdentityNow's REST APIs. Here we are generating personal access token with the help of Postman application. For generating personal access token via REST APIs, required name such as name of the personal token to be created and scope, but scopes in the optional value, and send the API request to the IdentityNow and request is valid, then 200 OK response will be print and as well as the response code also print in the JSON format. In this slide, we are going to see about how to generate automated acquisition of token in IdentityNow with the help of authorization code flow. Before that, we need to have a look on prerequisite. We require authorization through a client credentials such as client ID and client secret. Require an interactive user login. User should be logged in IdentityNow. Authorization based on the user's level access. User level permissions. Common usage only for web applications. So clients uses this grant type to exchange an authorization code for an access token. This is mainly used for web apps because there is an login into IdentityNow with the subsequent redirect back to the web app. This is the overall flow. The user clicks to the login link on a web app or a Postman application. For that, the web app sends an authorization request to IdentityNow. IdentityNow redirects the user to a login prompt to authenticate to IdentityNow. The user authenticates to IdentityNow. Once authentication is successful, IdentityNow issues an authorization code back to the web app. The web app submits an Auth 2.0 token request to IdentityNow. IdentityNow validates the token request and submit a response. If the request is successful, the response contains an JWT access token and sent to the web app. In this slide, we are discussing about how to generate automated acquisition of token in IdentityNow user interface with the help of authorization code flow. Generate personal access token with the help of SailPoint IdentityNow user interface. A personal access token is a method of authenticating to an API as a user without providing username and password. In IdentityNow, user can do following to create and manage their personal access token. First, user needs to log in to the SailPoint IdentityNow tenant. In Admin tab, under select a global and after that select security setting. Under select an API management. Left upper side corner, select new and give any descriptive name and select authorization code and fill redirect URL. Select scopes and drop down menu to create and generate a client ID and client secret and save this credential for future uses. In this slide, we are discussing about acquiring token from user interface. To generate access token using user interface, you must have a proper URL for an API request. For that, you must know your tenant name. The org name is displayed within the org detail section of a dashboard. If you do not have any admin access, you can still find your tenant name and the API based URL you will use for API calls. Now you have to log into your IdentityNow tenant and change your URL to the following, such as https://tenant URL/UI/session. Client use this grant type to exchange a refresh token for a new access token when the existing access token has expired. This allows clients to continue using APIs without having to re-authenticate as frequently. This grant type is commonly used together with authorization code to prevent a user from having to log in several times per day. An Auth 2.0 token for IdentityNow generated in a browser and valid until 10 minutes, after which it needs to be refreshed. In this slide, we are discussing about how to execute REST APIs in SailPoint IdentityNow from developer portal. Go to the developer.sailpoint.com and click on the IdentityNow. After clicking IdentityNow, select V3 collections of API. Inside V3 collections, select accounts. After the select account, under select the list accounts, in that one account list UI page will be opened. In this page, left side, keep your base URL as per your IdentityNow URL and keep the bearer token. Once this is done, click on send API request. If the API request and the bearer token is valid, it will respond as list of accounts. If the token is invalid, response is directly show JW token is failed. In this particular example, we are taking account list APIs. In this slide, we will discuss about REST API interaction with Postman. Postman collections are a group of saved requests and also each IdentityNow API version is broken out into a separate collection. To import a collection to your workspace, select Run in Postman button for your desired version. You can also fork a collection by selecting an ellipse to the right of the collection and selecting create a fork. For that, we also required base URL. To find your tenant name, log in into the IdentityNow, navigate to the admin, select a dashboard drop-down and select overview. The org name is displayed within the org details section of the dashboard. If you do not have admin access, you can still find your tenant name and API base URL you will use for API calls. Log in into your IdentityNow instance. Change your URL to the following, such as https:// your base URL.com /UI/session, where your base URL is your company's domain name for accessing IdentityNow. The session details you want is the base URL, which has a form of https://tenant.api.identitynow.com. We need to set limit. If we get the identity or account, so only 250 identity or account will be get on a single API call. It is the default value of a single API call is 250. Offset. Offset is an integer specifying an offset of the first result from beginning of a collection. The offset value is record based, not page based, and the index start at 0. For example, offset is 0 and limit is 50, return records 0 to 49, but offset is 1, then limit is 50, returns 1 to 50. The response means a successful account execution. 200 OK is a type of response, means a get account request is valid and it gives a successful call response 200 OK. Response code. In Postman application and choice the JSON format as a response, and after successful call JSON response code will be shown. In this slide we are discussing about REST API's usage. Here with the help of Postman, get the list of all sources in SailPoint IdentityNow. In Postman application, headers part access token is included. What is the API request type means what do you want to do, like get, post, delete, etc. In query parameter, select limit and offset, and the request body, what do you want to post or update. That body in JSON format will be present. Result part contains response code, response body and response headers. In response code, standard status codes. 200 means this code is used for a successful request. 201 for a successful request and data was created. 204 for empty response. A 400 bad request error is a generic client error, and 401 for JWT expired, and 404 is returned when the server is unable to find a method to match your exact request. A generic error message given when unexpected condition is encountered, and no more specific message is suitable, so 500 series response print. The HTTP 503 service unavailable server error response code indicates that the server is not ready to handle the request. Response body contains the response code in JSON format after successful valid the request. Headers in an HTTP request or a response is in additional information that is transferred to the users or a server. In this slide, we will discuss about rate limiting REST API's usage. Users who send many requests in a quick succession might be see error responses that show up as a status 429, a rate limiter that limits the number of requests received by API within any given seconds. For most APIs, allows up to 100 read operations per second and 100 write operations per second in a live mode, and 25 operations per second for each in test mode. But in SailPoint IdentityNow REST APIs, there is a rate limit of 100 requests per access token per 10 seconds for V3 API calls through the API gateway. If you execute the rate limit, expect the following responses from the API. Status code 429 means too many requests. Headers retry after. That's it from this session. If you have any questions, feel free to drop your question in the comment box. Please follow our social for more technical updates. Thank you.